Lieutenant Sarah Chun stood at the edge of the crowded marina, watching the Coast Guard rescue demonstration that had drawn hundreds of spectators to San Diego Bay. The annual Maritime Safety Expo was in full swing, with various naval and civilian organizations showcasing their capabilities to the public. Families with children pointed excitedly at the boats cutting through the water, while amateur photographers snapped pictures of the uniformed personnel directing the event. Sarah had come off duty just an hour earlier from her assignment aboard the USS Coronado, a literal combat ship docked nearby. Still wearing her crisp Navy uniform, she had decided to grab a quick lunch and watch the demonstrations before heading back to base. The California sun beat down mercilessly, and she found herself seeking shade under one of the temporary pavilions set up for vendors and information booths. At 28, Sarah had spent the last 8 years in the Navy, with the past 3 as a member of an elite maritime interdiction operations team. Her slight frame and quiet demeanor often surprised people when they learned about her specialized training. Standing barely 5 feet 4 inches tall, with shoulder-length black hair pulled back in regulation style, she looked more like a college student than someone trained in high-risk boarding operations and maritime combat. The rescue demonstration was winding down when Sarah noticed a commotion near the main staging area. A group of about 20 civilians, mostly men in their 30s and 40s, had gathered around what appeared to be a makeshift challenge course. Someone had set up a rope climbing station, a tactical obstacle course, and several other physical challenges typically associated with military training. Step right up and test your skills against real military standards, called out a large man wearing a faded Marine Corps t-shirt. His voice carried the confidence of someone accustomed to being the center of attention. We've got former Marines, Army Rangers, and even a couple of Navy guys here. Let's see if any civilians can measure up to real warrior training. Sarah moved closer, curiosity getting the better of her. The man appeared to be some sort of fitness instructor or personal trainer based on his muscular build and the way he carried himself. Several of his friends stood nearby, all sporting military-themed clothing and the kind of swagger that suggested they took their physical fitness very seriously. "Come on, don't be shy," the trainer continued, scanning the crowd. "These challenges are based on real Special Forces training. We'll spot you 50% if you're not military, but I guarantee none of you civilians have what it takes to complete our course." A few brave souls had stepped forward to attempt the challenges. Sarah watched as a young college student struggled with the rope climb, managing only a few feet before his grip gave out. A middle-aged businessman in khakis and a polo shirt tried his luck at the obstacle course, but quickly found himself winded after navigating just 2 of the barriers. The trainer and his friends were clearly enjoying themselves, offering what they probably considered helpful coaching, but came across as condescending commentary. "That's all right, buddy. Most people can't handle military-grade training. It takes a special kind of person to push through when things get tough." Sarah found herself frowning at the display. While she appreciated people trying to stay fit and challenge themselves, there was something off-putting about the way these men were presenting themselves. They seemed more interested in showing off their own superiority than genuinely encouraging others to test their limits. "Hey, you in the Navy uniform," the trainer suddenly called out, having spotted Sarah in the crowd. "Why don't you show these civilians how it's done? Unless the Navy's gotten soft since my day in the Corps." The comment drew chuckles from his companions and a few onlookers. Sarah felt dozens of eyes turned toward her, and she realized she had somehow become part of the spectacle. She had no desire to participate in what felt more like an ego-driven exhibition than a legitimate fitness challenge. "Thanks, but I was just watching," Sarah replied politely, taking a step back toward the crowd. "Ah, come on," pressed one of the trainer's friends, a stocky man with numerous tattoos covering his arms. "Don't tell me you're going to let the Navy down. We've got Marines and Army here representing their branches." "I'm sure you do," Sarah said, maintaining her professional composure despite feeling increasingly uncomfortable with the attention. "I hope everyone has a good time with your challenges." She turned to leave, but the trainer's voice stopped her. That's what I thought. Typical Navy, all about the boats and technology, not much when it comes to real physical training. Probably spends all day sitting behind a computer screen. The comment stung, not because Sarah doubted her own abilities, but because of the casual dismissal and assumptions being made. She had dedicated years to some of the most demanding physical and mental training the military had to offer. Her maritime interdiction operations team regularly conducted high-risk operations that required peak physical conditioning, advanced tactical skills, and the ability to perform under extreme pressure. But Sarah also knew better than to let pride dictate her actions. She had learned early in her career that proving yourself to random strangers was rarely worth the effort. She continued walking away, hoping to put some distance between herself and the increasingly boisterous group. "Hey, Navy girl, where are you going?" called another voice from the group. "Come on, we're just having some fun here. Don't take it so seriously." Sarah paused, recognizing the tone that suggested the situation was escalating beyond simple trash talk. She turned back to see that more people had gathered to watch what was clearly becoming some sort of confrontation. Families with children were starting to move away from the area, sensing the shift in atmosphere. The trainer had stepped closer, his friends flanking him in a way that felt more intimidating than friendly. "Look, I get it. You probably do important work on those ships. But this is about physical capability, real-world skills that matter when things get dangerous. I'm not trying to embarrass you, but let's be honest about what different branches of service actually prepare people for." Sarah could feel the weight of expectations from the crowd. Some spectators seemed genuinely curious about whether she would rise to the challenge, while others appeared uncomfortable with the increasingly aggressive tone of the interaction. A few active-duty sailors she recognized from other ships had moved closer, their expressions suggesting they were ready to intervene if necessary. "I appreciate the invitation," Sarah said carefully, "but I think you've got a good thing going here without me getting involved." "Right?" the trainer said with a dismissive laugh. "Because you know you can't hang with real warriors." "I get it. Different standards for different people." The implication hung in the air like a challenge that couldn't be ignored. Sarah felt her jaw tighten slightly, but she maintained her professional demeanor. Years of training had taught her to control her reactions, even when provoked. "Tell you what," the trainer continued, apparently emboldened by what he interpreted as Sarah's reluctance. "We'll make this interesting. You complete our full challenge course, rope climb, obstacles combat simulation, and endurance test, and I'll personally donate $500 to whatever Navy charity you want." His friends nodded approvingly, clearly confident in their companion's assessment of the situation. The trainer crossed his arms and smiled. "But when you can't finish, you admit in front of everyone here that Marines and Army train harder than Navy personnel." The crowd had grown larger now, drawn by the obvious tension and the promise of some sort of competition. Sarah could see phones coming out as people prepared to record whatever happened next. She realized that walking away was no longer a simple option. The situation had evolved beyond her control. "That's a generous offer," Sarah said, buying herself time to think. "What exactly does your challenge course involve?" 40-foot rope climb, speed, and technique, the trainer explained, his confidence evident. "Tactical obstacle course with barriers, crawls, and precision movement. Combat simulation with dummy targets. And a 2-mile run to finish it off. Complete the whole thing in under 25 minutes, which is what we require from our advanced clients." Sarah mentally calculated the requirements. The individual elements weren't particularly challenging for someone with her training, but the combination and time limits suggested these men had designed the course to be genuinely difficult. They clearly believed they had created something that would test even experienced military personnel. "And if I complete it?" Sarah asked. "Then you've earned some serious respect," the trainer replied. "But let's be realistic about the chances of that happening." Sarah looked around at the crowd, noting the mix of curiosity, skepticism, and anticipation on people's faces. She spotted several active duty personnel in the audience, their expressions ranging from concern to quiet confidence in their fellow service member. The trainer mistook her contemplation for hesitation. Look, there's no shame in knowing your limitations. Different people are built for different things. You probably excel at whatever technical stuff you do on ships. His words carried the unmistakable tone of condescension that finally pushed Sarah past her tolerance threshold. She had spent years proving herself in environments where failure could mean life or death for her team members. She had completed training programs that washed out candidates with twice her size and apparent physical advantages. "All right," Sarah said quietly, her voice carrying just enough edge to make several people lean forward to hear better. "I'll take your challenge." The trainer's smile widened, and he clapped his hands together. "Outstanding. This should be educational for everyone watching." As Sarah began removing her uniform jacket and rolling up her sleeves, she could hear murmurs from the crowd. Some spectators seemed excited about the prospect of seeing genuine military skills demonstrated, while others appeared concerned about what they perceived as a mismatch. "Just so we're clear on the rules," Sarah said, hanging her jacket on a nearby chair. 40-foot rope climb, obstacle course, combat simulation, 2-mile run, all in under 25 minutes? "That's right," the trainer confirmed. "And we'll be timing you closely. No shortcuts, no modifications for different physical capabilities. Same standards we hold our most advanced clients to." Sarah nodded, beginning her pre-activity stretching routine. Her movements were economical and precise, the result of years of disciplined training. She could feel the crowd's attention intensifying as she prepared herself for what everyone seemed to view as an inevitable demonstration of her limitations. What none of them knew was that Sarah had completed similar challenges dozens of times as part of her specialized training. Maritime interdiction operations required personnel who could board hostile vessels, navigate complex environments under fire, and complete missions that combined physical demands with tactical precision. The trainer was checking his stopwatch and conferring with his friends about the exact course layout. "We'll start you at the rope when you're ready," he called out. "Remember, this is time from the moment you touch that rope until you cross the finish line after the run." Sarah finished her stretching and walked toward the starting position. The crowd had grown to nearly 100 people now, drawn by word of mouth and the obvious spectacle that was about to unfold. She could see camera phones positioned at various angles, ready to capture whatever happened next. "Any questions before we start?" the trainer asked, his tone suggesting he was giving her one last chance to back out gracefully. "Just one," Sarah replied, looking directly at him. "That $500 donation you mentioned. Which Navy charity would you prefer?" The trainer laughed, apparently amused by what he interpreted as misplaced confidence. "Let's worry about that after you give this a try." Sarah smiled slightly and positioned herself at the base of the rope. "I was thinking the Navy SEAL Foundation. They do great work supporting families of special operations personnel." The mention of Navy SEALs drew some surprised murmurs from the crowd. The trainer's expression shifted slightly, perhaps beginning to wonder if he had misjudged the situation. "Ready when you are," Sarah said, her hands already gripping the rope in the proper position. The trainer raised his stopwatch. "On your mark, get set." The crowd fell silent, everyone straining to see what would happen in the next few seconds. Sarah's breathing was calm and controlled, her body positioned with the unconscious precision of someone who had performed similar movements countless times before. "Go!" Sarah's ascent up the 40-foot rope was nothing like what the crowd expected to see. Instead of the struggling, hand-over-hand climb they anticipated, she moved with fluid efficiency that spoke of countless hours of specialized training. Her technique was flawless, using her legs to grip and support while her arms pulled in smooth, coordinated movements that conserved energy and maximized speed. The trainer's confident expression began to change as Sarah reached the halfway point in less than 15 seconds. By the time she touched the top marker and began her controlled descent, murmurs of surprise were rippling through the gathered spectators. She completed the rope climb in 38 seconds, a time that would have been impressive for someone twice her size. "Rope climb complete," called one of the trainer's friends, his voice carrying a note of uncertainty that hadn't been there before. Sarah landed softly and immediately moved toward the obstacle course without pause. The layout included a series of barriers ranging from low crawls under netting to precision jumps between platforms, designed to test both speed and tactical movement skills. What the trainers didn't realize was that Sarah regularly navigated far more complex obstacles as part of her shipboarding operations training. The first obstacle required crawling under a cargo net stretched 18 inches off the ground. While most participants had struggled with this section, getting tangled or moving too slowly, Sarah dropped into a perfect low-crawl position. Her movement was so smooth and efficient that she seemed to flow under the netting like water, emerging on the other side before the crowd had fully processed what they were witnessing. Next came a series of wooden barriers of varying heights, designed to test climbing and vaulting abilities. Sarah approached each one with the tactical precision of someone trained to clear enemy obstacles under hostile conditions. Her movements were economical and purposeful. No wasted motion, no hesitation, just the fluid execution of techniques drilled into muscle memory through years of practice. "She's moving like a machine," someone in the crowd whispered loud enough for others to hear. The trainer was no longer smiling. He kept checking his stopwatch and exchanging increasingly concerned glances with his friends. What should have been an easy demonstration of civilian limitations was turning into something entirely different. Sarah reached the precision jumping section, where participants had to leap between platforms spaced at challenging distances. This obstacle had defeated several previous challengers, requiring both leg strength and exact distance calculation. Sarah assessed the layout quickly and began moving between platforms with the confidence of someone accustomed to making similar calculations under pressure. Her jumps were controlled and precise, landing in the center of each platform with enough stability to immediately launch into the next movement. The crowd watched in growing amazement as she cleared the entire sequence without hesitation or adjustment, her timing perfect throughout. "Obstacle course complete," announced another of the trainer's companions, his voice noticeably subdued. Sarah was breathing easily as she moved toward the combat simulation station. This section involved engaging multiple targets with rubber training weapons while navigating through a maze-like structure designed to simulate close-quarters combat scenarios. The trainers had set this up as their showpiece, believing it would highlight the difference between civilian capabilities and genuine combat training. What they didn't know was that Sarah regularly participated in live-fire ship clearance exercises that made their simulation look simple by comparison. Her training included engaging hostile personnel in confined spaces aboard moving vessels, often in conditions far more challenging than anything a static course could replicate. Sarah picked up the training weapon and immediately checked its action and weight distribution, standard procedure that spoke of extensive firearms familiarity. The targets were arranged throughout the maze structure, requiring participants to identify threats while moving through tactical positions. She entered the maze and immediately shifted into the movement patterns of her specialized training. Her weapon was held in proper tactical position as she flowed through the structure, identifying targets and engaging them with the kind of precision that comes from years of advanced marksmanship training. The rubber projectiles struck their targets with mechanical consistency. Sarah's movement through the maze was smooth and purposeful, each position change calculated to provide maximum effectiveness while minimizing exposure. She cleared the entire sequence in less than 2 minutes, a time that left the trainers staring at their stopwatches in disbelief. "Combat simulation complete," the trainer announced, his earlier bravado completely absent from his voice. The crowd was no longer just watching a challenge attempt. They were witnessing a demonstration of elite-level military capabilities that most civilians never get to see. Phones were recording from multiple angles as people realized they were watching something genuinely extraordinary. Sarah moved toward the final component of the challenge, a 2-mile run around a course that included both flat sections and several hills designed to test endurance and mental toughness. The trainers had placed this element last, believing that even if someone managed the earlier obstacles, they would be too exhausted to maintain the pace necessary to complete the full challenge within the time limit. They had seriously underestimated Sarah's conditioning. Maritime interdiction operations personnel maintain fitness standards that go far beyond basic military requirements. Their work demands the ability to perform complex physical tasks while under extreme stress, often after hours of preparation and approach time. Sarah began the run at a pace that immediately told experienced observers she knew exactly what she was doing. Her stride was efficient and controlled, the rhythm of someone who regularly covered similar distances as part of her training routine. She wasn't just trying to finish the challenge. She was running with the confidence of someone who knew she could complete it well within the required time. The first mile took her through the flat sections of the course, where spectators could track her progress easily. Her breathing remained controlled, and her form stayed consistent, showing no signs of the fatigue that would typically affect someone who had just completed the physical challenges she had navigated. As Sarah approached the hill sections that marked the beginning of the second mile, the trainer turned to his friends with an expression of growing concern. "She's going to finish," he said quietly, the reality of the situation beginning to sink in. "How is that possible?" one of his companions asked. "That course is designed to break down even advanced athletes. I think we may have made a serious mistake about who we're dealing with," the trainer replied, watching Sarah attack the first hill with the same controlled intensity she had shown throughout the entire challenge. The crowd had begun to spread out along the course route, with people positioning themselves to watch Sarah's progress through the more challenging sections of the run. Word was spreading beyond the immediate area, drawing additional spectators who had heard about what was happening. Sarah crested the first hill and began the descent with perfect running form, her pace actually increasing slightly as she used the downward slope to her advantage. Her tactical training included running while carrying equipment over varied terrain, often while wearing full gear and under time constraints that made this challenge seem almost recreational by comparison. The second hill was steeper and longer, designed to test mental toughness as much as physical conditioning. Sarah approached it with the same methodical intensity she had shown throughout the challenge, her stride adjusting automatically to maintain efficiency on the incline. Halfway up the hill, she passed a marker that allowed the trainers to calculate her overall time. The trainer looked at his stopwatch and swore under his breath. Sarah was not only going to complete the challenge within the required 25 minutes, she was on pace to finish with time to spare. "This is impossible," muttered one of his friends. "She's a computer technician or something. Navy personnel don't train like this." "Some of them do," the trainer replied grimly, finally beginning to understand the magnitude of his error. "I think we just challenged someone way out of our league." As Sarah created the second hill and began the final section of the run, the crowd could see her approaching the finish line with the same controlled confidence she had shown throughout the entire challenge. Her uniform was damp with perspiration, but her breathing remained steady and her pace never faltered. The trainer raised his stopwatch as Sarah entered the final 100 meters. The crowd began spontaneous applause, recognizing they had witnessed something special regardless of their initial expectations. Sarah crossed the finish line and immediately began a proper cool-down routine, her movements still precise and professional despite having just completed what was supposed to be an exhausting physical challenge. The trainer looked at his stopwatch in disbelief. 21 minutes and 37 seconds, he announced to the crowd. Complete success with 3.5 minutes to spare. The applause intensified as people realized the full scope of what they had just witnessed. Sarah had not only completed the challenge, but had done so with a margin that suggested she could have pushed even harder if necessary. She retrieved her uniform jacket and began putting it back on while the crowd continued to show their appreciation. The trainer approached her with an expression that mixed respect with embarrassment. "That was incredible," he said genuinely. "I owe you and everyone here an apology. I completely misjudged what you were capable of. Sarah nodded politely while finishing with her uniform. Different people train for different missions, she replied simply. I happen to train for some pretty demanding ones. What exactly do you do in the Navy? Asked one of the trainer's friends, his earlier swagger replaced by genuine curiosity. Maritime interdiction operations, Sarah answered. We board ships and conduct high-risk missions in various maritime environments. The trainer's eyes widened as the implications of her specialty began to sink in. So, you're basically special operations? We work with special operations units regularly, Sarah confirmed. The training standards are similar because the mission requirements demand it. Several active duty personnel who had been watching approached to congratulate Sarah on her performance. It was clear from their interactions that word of her specialty was spreading quickly through the military members present. About that Navy SEAL Foundation donation, Sarah said to the trainer, $500 as promised. The trainer reached for his wallet without hesitation. Absolutely. And I'll make it 1,000 for the lesson in humility you just gave me. As Sarah accepted the donation commitment and began making arrangements for the actual transfer, the crowd started to disperse. But many people lingered, clearly wanting to process what they had just witnessed and perhaps hoping for additional insights into the level of training that had made such a performance possible. The trainer and his friend were packing up their equipment with notably less enthusiasm than they had shown while setting up their challenge course. The entire dynamic of their demonstration had been completely reversed by Sarah's unexpected capabilities. I think we need to revise some of our assumptions about different military branches, one of them commented as they worked. And maybe be a little more careful about who we challenge in the future, added another. Sarah was fielding questions from several families who want to know more about Navy training and career opportunities. Her professional demeanor and obvious competence were making a strong impression on people who had initially viewed the military through stereotypes and limited understanding. The aftermath of Sarah's performance continued to draw attention for the rest of the afternoon. Word had spread throughout the Maritime Safety Expo about what had happened to the challenge course, and people were seeking her out to learn more about maritime interdiction operations and the training that had made such a demonstration possible. A reporter from the local Navy Times approached Sarah as she was speaking with a group of high school students who had been inspired by her performance. Lieutenant Shun, could I get a few minutes of your time for an article about today's events? Sarah glanced at her watch, noting she still had an hour before she needed to report back to her ship. I'd be happy to talk, but I want to make sure the focus is on the maritime interdiction operations community as a whole, not just what happened here today. The reporter nodded enthusiastically. Absolutely. Most people don't know this specialty even exists. Can you tell me about what maritime interdiction operations actually involves? As Sarah began explaining her field, more people gathered to listen. She described how her team conducted boarding operations on vessels suspected of smuggling, piracy, or other illegal activities. The work required extensive training in close-quarters combat, advanced climbing and rappelling techniques, maritime navigation, and the ability to operate effectively in high-stress situations with minimal backup. The physical requirements are just one component, Sarah explained. We also need extensive training in international maritime law, cultural awareness for operations in different regions, advanced communications, and tactical medicine. Every team member has to be capable of performing multiple roles depending on mission requirements. One of the high school students raised her hand. How do you get selected for that kind of training? It starts with meeting basic Navy fitness and performance standards, Sarah replied. Then there's a selection process that tests both physical and mental capabilities under stress. The actual training pipeline takes about 18 months and has a significant attrition rate. What's the hardest part of the training? Asked another student. Sarah considered the question carefully. Probably the scenario-based exercises where you have to make split-second decisions that could affect team safety and mission success. The physical challenges are demanding, but the mental pressure of knowing that mistakes can have serious consequences is what really tests people. The trainer who had organized the challenge course approached the group with obvious hesitation. "Lieutenant, I wanted to apologize again for my assumptions earlier. I clearly didn't understand what I was dealing with." "No offense taken," Sarah replied graciously. "You created an interesting challenge course. I'm sure it's effective for testing general fitness levels. Would you mind if I asked you some questions about training methodologies?" The trainer continued. "I work with people who want to improve their physical capabilities, and I'd like to understand better how military training achieves the kind of results we saw today." Sarah spent the next 20 minutes discussing training philosophy with the trainer and several other fitness professionals who had gathered to listen. She explained how military training focuses on functional fitness that translates to real-world performance rather than isolated physical achievements. "Everything we do has a purpose beyond just being physically demanding," she explained. "The rope climbing techniques I use today are the same ones I need for boarding operations. The obstacle course movements translate directly to navigating ship structures under hostile conditions. There's no separation between training and actual mission requirements." A woman in the crowd raised her hand. "My daughter is interested in military service. Are there opportunities for women in these specialized fields?" "Absolutely," Sarah replied immediately. "Maritime interdiction operations teams are fully integrated, and performance is the only criterion that matters. Some of our most effective operators are women who bring different perspectives and capabilities to the team." She went on to describe how modern military operations require diverse skill sets that don't necessarily correlate with traditional physical stereotypes. Mission success depends on having team members who can adapt to different situations and think creatively under pressure. Physical capability is important, but it's not the only factor. The conversation continued for another 15 minutes, with Sarah fielding questions about everything from training routines to deployment schedules to career advancement opportunities. Her ability to articulate complex concepts in accessible terms was clearly making an impression on her audience. As the group began to disperse, several people approached Sarah individually to thank her for taking the time to share her insights. The high school students were particularly enthusiastic, with several expressing new interest in exploring military career options. The trainer waited until most people had left before approaching Sarah one final time. "I want you to know that today was genuinely educational for me. I've been training people for 15 years, but I've never seen someone perform with that level of precision and efficiency." "Different training for different purposes," Sarah replied. "What you're doing with civilian fitness is valuable too. It's just designed for different goals." "Still," the trainer continued, "I learned something important about making assumptions based on appearances or preconceptions. That won't happen again." As Sarah was preparing to leave, she noticed a young woman in Navy uniform who had been watching from the edge of the crowd throughout the afternoon. The woman approached with obvious nervousness. "Lieutenant Shun, I'm Seaman Rodriguez from the USS San Diego. I was wondering if I could ask you about applying for maritime interdiction operations training." Sarah smiled and gestured toward a quiet area where they could talk privately. "Of course. What specifically would you like to know?" For the next 10 minutes, Sarah provided detailed guidance about the application process, training requirements, and what Rodriguez could do to prepare herself for selection. Her advice was practical and encouraging, focusing on actionable steps rather than abstract concepts. "The most important thing is to be honest about your motivations and realistic about the commitment required," Sarah concluded. "It's challenging training that leads to demanding operational assignments, but it's also incredibly rewarding work with outstanding people." Rodriguez thanked her enthusiastically and promised to begin preparing immediately for the application process. As she walked away, Sarah could see the determination and excitement that suggested she would indeed follow through on her interest. The reporter from Navy Times had been taking notes throughout many of these interactions. "Lieutenant, one final question if you don't mind. What would you want people to take away from today's events?" Sarah thought for a moment before responding. "That capabilities and dedication come in many forms, and it's important not to judge what people can accomplish based on initial impressions. The Navy invests heavily in training because we know that proper preparation allows people to exceed what they thought was possible. And the demonstration itself was just training put into practice, Sarah replied simply. Every member of our community could have done something similar because that's what our missions require. I just happened to be the one who got challenged today. As the reporter finished taking notes, Sarah checked her watch and realized she needed to start heading back toward her ship. The afternoon had stretched longer than she had planned, but the opportunities to educate people about her specialty and potentially inspire future service members had made the time worthwhile. Several people called out thanks and farewells as Sarah walked back toward the main marina area. The trainer waved from where he was finishing packing up his equipment, and she could see him talking animatedly with his friends about what they had witnessed. The crowd at the Maritime Safety Expo had thinned considerably as families headed home for dinner, but Sarah noticed clusters of people still discussing what they had seen. Some were clearly military families who understood the significance of the performance they had witnessed, while others were civilians processing new information about military capabilities and training standards. As Sarah approached the security checkpoint for returning to the naval base, she reflected on how the afternoon had evolved from a simple lunch break into an extended public engagement opportunity. While she hadn't sought out the attention or confrontation, the chance to represent her community positively and educate people about maritime interdiction operations had ultimately made the experience worthwhile. The security guard at the checkpoint recognized her from earlier and smiled as she presented her identification. "Heard you put on quite a show at the expo today, Lieutenant." "Word travels fast," Sarah replied with a slight smile. "My buddy was there with his kids. Said it was the most impressive thing he's seen since he got out of the Marines. Got him thinking about what other military specialties he didn't know about." Sarah nodded as she passed through security. "That's exactly the kind of awareness we hope to build through these public events." Walking back toward her ship, Sarah could see the USS Coronado's distinctive profile against the evening sky. Her teammates would undoubtedly want to hear about her afternoon adventure, especially since word was likely to reach them through the Navy's efficient and formal communication network. She was already anticipating the good-natured ribbing she would receive about becoming an internet sensation, since she was certain that multiple videos of her performance were already making their way through social media. But she was also satisfied that her impromptu demonstration had served to highlight the capabilities and professionalism of the maritime interdiction operations community. As Sarah climbed the gangway to board her ship, she thought about Seaman Rodriguez and the other young service members who had approached her with questions about specialized training opportunities. If her performance that afternoon inspired even a few people to pursue challenging career paths or gain appreciation for military capabilities, then the unexpected confrontation would have served a valuable purpose. The duty officer greeted her as she came aboard. "Good afternoon, Lieutenant. Productive time at the expo." "Very educational," Sarah replied, heading toward her quarters to change out of her uniform. For everyone involved. The next morning, Sarah would discover that video clips of her challenge course performance had indeed gone viral, generating thousands of comments and shares across multiple social media platforms. The Navy Times article would be picked up by several national outlets, leading to interview requests and increased public interest in maritime interdiction operations. But for now, she was simply a Navy officer returning from Liberty, ready to resume her normal duties aboard ship. The afternoon's events had reminded her why she had chosen such a demanding career path. Not for recognition or to prove points to skeptics, but because the work itself was meaningful and the standards required to do it well pushed her to capabilities she might never have discovered otherwise. The Trainer's Challenge course had been designed to demonstrate limitations, but instead had provided a platform for showcasing what dedicated training and professional commitment could achieve. Sometimes the most powerful demonstrations happen not when you seek them out, but when circumstances create unexpected opportunities to represent something larger than yourself. As Sarah settled into her evening routine aboard the USS Coronado, she was already looking forward to the next day's training exercises with her team. There would be new challenges to master, skills to refine, and missions to prepare for. The afternoon at the Maritime Safety Expo had been an interesting diversion, but her real work was just beginning.